Years ago, there was a time when there was one tower that ruled the game. It was better than Accelerator is, better than Engineer is, more useful than Commander and DJ as support. If we scroll to the bottom of our exclusive list, today you wouldn't even know. Maybe Gladiator? I mean, it's a really good tower for speedrunning, but no, I am talking so much better than that. And this tower is the Toxic Gunner. Not a lot of people have the Toxic Gunner, and I do want to see if 2 years later, this tower is still as good as it once was. I'll talk about exactly what happened with the Toxic Gunner, and whether or not we should see this thing make a comeback. And here we go, with a pretty strong loadout, I think we can pretty confidently beat a difficult map. I'm gonna try doing this on Sacred Mountain. And this is because, well, I'm using a pretty good loadout, and the way Toxic Gunner worked back then would have actually made this map very easy. In fact, Toxic Gunner was the only way to be able to solo some maps. For example, Dead Ahead, at the time, it was impossible to solo it. Yes, TDS did not have such a ridiculous power creep where, 8 accelerators that can do just 1 trillion damage and take down anything. But no, back then it was actually pretty difficult to do what is possible today. It's just over time, as updates have come out, everything just got stronger. The Cowboy, back then, it used to make random money, so right now it's making us $25 a shot. Back then it could be making 10. Oh, and also it wouldn't even immediately give you cash. You'd have to actually upgrade it in order for it to give you money, which is super stupid because the only reason you're using Cowboy is to make money. So having to invest a lot more into it just to potentially make $10, yeah, it was not a great investment. But yeah, let me actually talk about the Toxic Gunner itself now, because I'm assuming not many people have seen it over the course of, well, basically since it was nerfed. The way the Toxic Gunner worked is basically take Soldier and replace its bullets with poison bullets. So the bullets would do some damage over time. Think like Pyro. The Toxic Gunner would hit the enemies and then they would die off. Also, I'm gonna get a Cowboy up front because I just don't want to really have to wait 20 minutes in order for the stuff to get to the back. But yeah, as I was saying, the Toxic Gunner would shoot the enemies, it would apply the poison effect, and then the most useful thing about Toxic Gunner was that it would slow down enemies. And the thing is, it wasn't some cheap useless slowdown like Freezer, where like, yeah, you'll be slowing down one enemy for a bit. You could actually slow down entire hordes, so like this whole heavy horde would be moving, I don't know, some percentage slower. I can't even remember at this point. That is, of course, if you set its targeting to something like strongest or random, so that it would hit all the enemies. But that wasn't even its most useful feature. Yes, it could slow down enemies, but it could also slow down the Fallen King. And I'm talking by a lot. The Fallen King normally moves, pretty slowly. Most times you don't need him to be moving any slower in order to be able to kill him. But back then it was actually kind of needed. This is again because we didn't have stuff like this 500 DPS accelerator with our commander ability. We didn't have stuff like this Golden Cowboy, which can actually make us a lot of money and, save some slots in the loadout by being viable defense early game. We didn't have the Ranger that does 1,000 damage. We didn't have Golden Minigunners that did like 200 something DPS when they have commanders. So yeah, times were a lot harder back then. So the slowdown of Toxic Gunner, 50% by the way. Think about the length of this track, right? And basically with Toxic Gunner, it would be the equivalent of adding a whole nother turn right here. Can you imagine this whole entire first turn just being slapped on at the end? If your towers aren't that strong, then that much extra room is absolutely needed to win the game. And there was especially no exception for maps like Dead Ahead. That if you wanted to beat Dead Ahead, then Toxic Gunner was your only bet. Oh, and I should mention, the Toxic Gunner wasn't intended to be as good as it was. The thing is, it was glitched, right? So when it hit the Fallen King, first of all, it shouldn't have been able to hit the Fallen King, and second of all, it shouldn't have been able to slow down enemies permanently. That's what made the Toxic Gunner even better. It's the fact you could get down one Toxic Gunner, and your Fallen King's moving slower for the rest of the map. Like, you didn't even have to rebuy another Toxic Gunner further back. That was all you needed. I think it's about time to also get a DJ. Gonna get it down right here. So yeah, I don't really think it's a surprise to anyone that this was the best tower in the game. We all know Commander, right? This thing gives our towers 55% more damage, right? Because Call to Arms is like 30% and like passive it's like 25%. This just makes Commander absolutely necessary if you want to do hardcore, Badlands, you name it, you're going to need to use Commander. And Toxic Gunner with its 50% slowdown was basically a free second Commander. Now, let's get the Toxic Gunner here, because I think it would be pretty useful to slow these things down. We only really need to get a low level one right now, because it doesn't really do much other than make it shoot faster. Also, we're going to take some HP, but that's okay. I'm going to upgrade the Toxic Gunner because this upgrade back then used to be the god upgrade. You're paying only 1,600 to make this fire super fast. And watch this, by the way. Look at this. This thing actually fires fast, and it would slow down enemies a lot. Now, unfortunately, the slowdown on these enemies is not that much today. The slowdown used to be completely insane. Like, yeah, it was just unreasonably broken. But let me actually set it to random, because this is what made it kind of good. It'll shoot a bunch of the enemies and actually make them slower. Now you can see this breaker is catching up to the one in front, and yeah, that's of course because the toxic gunner is slowing them down. Also, I'm gonna need to get some more cowboy firepower here, because these breakers are kind of difficult. But yeah, this is no 50% slowdown. This is way less than 50%. But it still does not bad damage. Wow. This is indeed something truly unique. Well, maybe the defenses we have back here are enough. I don't think so. Alright, so I'm on another map. I think it would be a good idea to place down Toxic Gunner just to see kind of how he's able to do on his own. I want to put him down somewhere where the commander is going to see him. And I mainly want to do this just to see how much damage the Toxic Gunner can get done. I'm going to put the Toxic Gunner right here. I'm not going to do anything with it right now because there's stealth. But yeah, let's just look at its initial stats. You're paying $400 to get some pretty good DPS out of this thing, actually. Next round, there's a lot of breakers, which is going to be a little bit annoying, but we're going to see how much damage the Toxic Gunner can do before the breakers, you know, reach my cowboys. Okay, this one is just 2x reload speed, and this one actually gets the poison. So this one doesn't even really do anything. It just does damage. This poison actually slows them down. Now, the true amount of damage that the poison does, that's actually kind of hard to see because of how glitchy this total damage thing is. But alright, hopefully I can get a better idea of it on these heavies. And I must say, it's not terrible. Like, it hit this one, and yeah, it may be like 1 or 2 damage. I don't know why I said not terrible. I really thought it was doing more than that. But now let's get this one. This one should make a pretty big difference. I can actually see by the amount of money I'm going up that, yeah, this thing does not terrible damage. It's just the slowdown, you barely notice it. I mean, like, what percent is it, this really? Maybe 10%. It's 10% on a good day is what it is. So, not that good. I guess I'll get Call to Arms and try not to die on the Necromancer round because I'll just use an ability. I'm gonna actually set it to strongest in order to see how much damage we can really get done to the Necromancer. And we are currently damaging this quite a lot, actually. We managed to get the Necromancer down about 200 HP. I'm gonna set it back to first because I do want it to target the skeletons in the front. And this time it seems much better. I should be able to kill it now. And yeah, it dies. Now, what I'm actually interested in is the max level. There's about to be a bunch of Fallens, and I want to get Nuclear Overload. Because back then, remember, it was like 50%. This upgrade was super good. And now, here we go. Max level Toxic Gunner. Let's see what it does. Can it actually slow down a lot? And, well, by the looks of it, it slows down somewhat. But this is like a nuclear minigunner, so this thing slows down, shoots pretty fast, and actually does really great DPS, like not a little bit of damage. Yep, look at the damage it does to the heavies. As for the poison damage, I actually have no idea. Let me just use a commander ability here. And yeah, well, this is doing some good work. Again, really, the speed difference is barely noticeable. It also doesn't have hidden detection, and because there's a shadow boss soon, I am going to get an accelerator. Now, I think this would be a lot better if I set this on random. So yes, now see, it'll be shooting and slowing everything down. And getting poison on everything, which will allow it to get way more damage. At least, I wish I could be able to see how much. Well, here comes the shadow boss. I will just get another one of these level 3 cowboys, and I think combined with the accelerator, it should be alright. Actually, not exactly. The accelerator needs to switch targeting, but yeah, it's fine. Alright, yeah, this is actually not that terrible on random. Look at this. It goes kind of crazy. I think I'm going to go for Max DJ just for some more discounts and some more range. And Toxic Gunner with Max DJ actually kind of sees a lot. Like, if I got it towards the center of the map, it would actually see most of the map. Also, I noticed it kind of slowing down everything. The funny thing is, even though it got nerfed so hard, like, this is so much worse than it once was. Because back then, basically, if it hits these glitches, they would be moving so much slower. And I'm not kidding when I say way slower. I actually mean way slower. And they would be moving way slower forever. Because right now, when the poison wears off, the enemies just speed up again. even though the poison actually lasts surprisingly a very long time. I'm currently looking at the wiki, and the poison time is 5 seconds. So basically, once this Toxic Gunner hits an enemy, they're going to be poisoned for 5 seconds. And from what I'm seeing, actually, the Toxic Gunner, the way it works is the more it hits an enemy, the slower the enemy gets. So when you're setting it on random, it'll only hit the enemies and slow them down by 4%. 4%, let's be honest, nobody knows. Literally nobody notices a 4% difference. But if the Toxic Gunner hits an enemy enough times, it'll slow it down all the way to 20%. Now, 20% slowdown. Don't get me wrong, let's look at this track. So this is about a quarter of the track, this is a quarter, this is a quarter, and this is a quarter. So 20% slowdown adds like a turn and almost an entire full turn. What I'm saying is the Toxic Gunner will slow down enemies enough to the point where they'll be on the track about like, you know, this much distance longer. About. Still don't think I made much sense, but hey, I mean, if you understand, you do get to see that that's not like a completely useless advantage. This actually will come in really handy for enemies like the Necromancer boss is what I'm thinking of right now. In fact, because it needs several shots to slow down enemies all the way, we should get several Toxic Gunners. And there we go. We have 4 Toxic Gunners now. This one, I'm probably going to set it to last. And these 4 Toxic Gunners are going to be shooting literally all the enemies. So we are going to see some pretty significant slowdown. I mean, look at these bosses. They're actually moving considerably slower. And yeah, this tank... No. Compared to the normal tank speed, this actually, you can notice that it's moving slower. Unfortunately, there's breakers, which are really difficult. So I'm going to upgrade my cowboys just to do more damage and be able to kill those off. I think when the big breaker pops, yeah, the little breakers inside, I don't think they get slowed down. Well, they don't get slowed down until the Toxic Gunner shoots at them, is what I think. But when you have 4, they actually all get slowed down. Who could have guessed? Even after its best ability of permanently slowing down enemies by a lot more than this. Remember, right now it's 20%, and back then it was 50%. Even though it's nerfed from that point, it actually still feels pretty fun to use. I mean, it doesn't feel completely terrible and garbage, and that makes me really happy. It's not like the you-know-what that just recently got added. I'm talking about the Necromancer, of course, because it's terrible until Tower Defense Simulator reworks it, which they said they will, and I'm hoping to every single god in existence that it's going to be useful. But yeah, I'm really just struggling to put into terms how good the old Toxic Gunner was. I know I've already said it, but saying it, I just don't think it does it justice. It was literally better than anything in the game today. Better than our 200 plus DPS Golden Mini. Like, nothing will ever be as good as the Toxic Gunner was on release. Unless maybe it's bugged, you know, like, military base used to be bugged. And yeah, that thing would slow down enemies way more than Toxic Gunner would. We're talking like 99.9% slowdown. You could be sitting there for 40 minutes to have your enemies move like a little bit. But you know, I'm still happy to see this. Toxic Gunner, despite it being so long, and despite it getting nerfed, you could still pretty comfortably use it. It's not complete garbage. I'm also start getting more accelerators now because we're approaching wave 40. Oh, and here's the Necromancer boss I was talking about. No freeze and no stun. But guess what? Toxic Gunner slowdown works perfectly fine on it. And that's extremely useful, of course, because the Necromancer boss is arguably way too fast for what it is. I don't remember if I mentioned it, but this thing's poison attack actually does do 10 damage. So that means if you have like 10 enemies and you set the Toxic Gunner to random and it hits them all, it'll actually be doing like 100 DPS. Even more than that, because, you know, it's still hitting an enemy. And combined with the fact that it slows down, this really is not that bad of a tower, which really holds up. I mean, take a look at some of the other event towers. We got Commando, we got Frost Blaster, we got Slasher. When have you seen those? The only times people use those is to flex that they have them. Nobody actually uses them because they're useful. But yeah, here comes wave 40. I'm gonna get down my last accelerator right here. Actually, I can surprisingly place one more. I guess I'll do that then. I should be able to afford it pretty quick. And sadly, the Warden just did that. Oh wow, surprisingly, the Toxic Gunner can also slow down Fallen Guardians. Okay, that is quite impressive. Now the Fallen King, though, yeah, that Toxic Gunner is not really gonna handle well. Well, I think accelerators and golden cowboys should be able to do all the damage that we need anyways. And there goes Fallen King. So yeah, this was it. The long forgotten, once best tower in the game. If you enjoyed, you should like, subscribe, use StarCode, and I'll see you, oh my god, in the next one.